means our side can come out on top and we can repair the damage that's been done to our country before it's too late.
The Sean Spicer Show, weeknights at 6 p.m. Eastern on the First TV.
Really two great people to break down what we should be looking for as we start to talk and get ahead of this second debate. All right, I want to welcome in Erin Elmore and Mark Lauder. Guys, good to see you both. We are 20 days, as I said, from this second debate. I want to break it down piece by piece and kind of get your take. Erin, I'll start with you. The debate moderators, Dana Perino, Stuart Varney, and this woman, Ilya Calderon from Univision. I've always thought these debates were too much about the moderators. What do you think about these folks going into this one?
Well, I love Stuart Varney. I used to do his show on Fox Business all the time. He's an extremely measured guy, very British, but he did become an American citizen. And obviously we know that Dana worked in a conservative White House. So I think the two of them are perfectly suited. We haven't seen them before, so I think they're going to bring sort of a new angle together. Yeah. Also very fair and balanced. And I like that Univision will be a part of this because in my home state of Florida, we saw that DeSantis won Dade County in his governor's race. And we know that that is largely because of the Hispanic Cuban community, and Cubans and Hispanics in general are family oriented people. They don't want to be called Latinx. They want to be called Latina or Latino. And I think that as conservatives, if we work harder to sort of understand the needs of these communities, we will do better in getting even more of the vote because the left has completely abandoned these people. Left sort of understanding who they think they are, but no understanding that these are family first, education first, faith first kind of people. And that's really what the conservatives need to lean into, harness their energy, get their votes. So I think this Univision angle, great idea.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised you thought that. Mark, what do you think about the moderators and Univision's position? I get Erin's point. I just feel like that's a nice general election thing. I'm not really sure what it adds to the primary, but I'm interested to know what you think of that.
Well, I think the more that we can engage with the Latino community, the better we are.
The radio, in terms of Hispanic radio, I read pretty recently that a lot of those small stations were purchased by a liberal conglomerate. Yeah. It's trying to change the narrative of what they're hearing on the radio. So any chance we can get to expose ourselves and all of our candidates to that community, I think will be a value additive and a good idea because they might be getting misinformation and disinformation from other sources.
But here's my point. I feel like when we have I led this effort in 2015. Part of my problem is, are you informing Republican voters on issues that they will vote on, right? And I feel like, and look, if I'm wrong, then I'll be the first one to say it. But I feel like we're walking into a trap where all Univision is going to want to talk about is immigration and family separation, and not what we as Republicans. I want to know who's going to be the strongest to build the wall.
No, I don't think so, because I think they see that those communities see these issues as related. They don't want an open border either.
But that's my point. I agree with you. But what I'm saying is, I think Univision has an agenda, which is they're going to go in and make Republicans sound like that they lack heart and that we should have this pro-immigration policy. I agree with you on a lot of their viewers, but that's what I'm getting at is Univision the right choice to help Republican voters make a decision as to who the right candidate is that will be strong on the border, strong on immigration?
Well, I think we're doing the opposite of Monday morning quarterbacking, right? We're getting pre-steamed here.
Yes.
We don't know exactly what's going to happen. So there are so many variables and it's so hard for us to say. So right now we're just sort of spitballing to see what happens. But we certainly could say the direction that we want it to go in is, yes, have this component of showing that Republicans are strong on the border while also being compassionate. And I do think that that's going to come across here because Democrats, Republicans, and independents are all starting to see that this border crisis impacts them. Fentanyl is pouring through this border, killing people in all 50 states. And that's a problem that is starting to transcend. You see in New York City and Chicago, of all those people who voted Democrat, they're saying, look what you're doing to our community. Our children's schools have migrants in them. Our public parks have migrants in them. We cannot walk down the street. So I actually think that this issue might be the one that shapes the 2024 election, because it has now come to all of their backyards and they're saying enough is enough.
So Mark, I agree with Erin, but my question still stands. I just feel like what Erin articulated is what Republicans want to hear. How are we addressing the surge of migrants? How are we addressing their impact on our economy?
Probably carries the biggest weight and the biggest role in this debate, because obviously the Univision host is going to focus on the issues that they feel is important. Stu's going to be in his wheelhouse on the economy, and Dana, not only being a journalist and obviously an accomplished host at Fox, but being the former message guru for a conservative administration, she can tie the bow to the other areas where, whether the question is coming from the Univision host or not, they're going to hear Dana's questions.
Brought up a bunch of other issues, and you talked about Stewart's role and Dana's role, and I wrote that down because I think it's going to be interesting. I think back to my time when I ran these things. CNBC, I thought, was a business network, and they would focus on business and the economy. And literally, it was like the worst night of my life up until then. They made a mockery of the debates. But let me ask you, Erin, what topics, based on what you heard at the first debate, what topics do you think are important to hear at this next debate that might have been missed at the last one?
That's a really good question, because I think when you reflect back upon the first debate, we had so many ancillary factors, like whether it was the Trump interview with Tucker that were sort of muddying the waters, and the fact that they were not prepared for, Vivek, that sounds like cake, right? So he sort of dominated. So now I think it's going to be just drilling down on those issues. And I do think it's important to know who stands for continuing the war in Ukraine and how much should be spent there. I think that's a big one. And what do we want to do about our children's education? Governor DeSantis has been great in Florida about protecting our children from indoctrination in schools. I think obviously we know the economy, gas prices, grocery store prices, all of those sorts of things. The Chinese Communist Party and their role, and how we're going to bring manufacturing jobs back, and how we're going to stop our infringement of intellectual property. I think some of those are the top line issues, but I think it's going to be these fighting personalities to get a word in edgewise, because Vivek's really the strongest one up there, whether you like it or not. And they were all trying to attack him, but then they didn't make their own points. Like, nothing that they were saying was landing. They were too busy trying to steal the air back from him, because he really, really stole the show.
Mark, what issues do you think? Like, I realized the last debate, we didn't talk anything about veterans. We didn't talk anything about the Second Amendment. I mean, to Erin's point, very little about China and fentanyl and all this. And then obviously our military and the strength. I mean, I feel like a lot got overlooked last time.
Well, the thing I worry about most in some of those areas is that it's just going to be a check the box, because, I mean, for the most part, every candidate who's running, they're all running on the same platform.
Moms such as myself, listening to those Zoom calls and saying, wait a second, this is supposed to be math class. What the heck is my child learning? And I joined a group when I was still living in Pennsylvania called Pennsylvania Conservative Women. And they were these women that were completely apolitical. And now there are several 100,000 women strong who started a path because they saw what their children were learning, and they said enough is enough. So I think we can't underestimate the power of those mama bears. But what about those liberal, college-educated, white suburban women on the other side? So what are we going to do to get them? Because we know that Governor DeSantis passed a very early abortion ban in Florida. And sometimes those women are single issue voters.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a balance to figure out how we win over those people and also the independents.
So, Mark,
that's what I was going to say as well. I don't think the electorate right now wants someone from the inside. The drain the swamp statement went really far and resonated with a lot of people. And the people that came out and voted for Donald Trump, many of whom never voted before, he spoke to them because he was talking to them like they were people, they had a voice, and it mattered. The career politicians were something that they were just not interested in. So to say now you sort of want this smarmy insider is definitely not reading the room or the electorate. And that's why I do think that Vivek is a really good second option, because he's from the outside. He's willing to stand up to the establishment. And when Nikki Haley yelled at him on the stage, she sounded like she was screaming at an insolent child, and it did not play well.
But you say that, Erin, but the funny thing about it is I kind of agree with you. I watched it and I said, I agree with what both of you are saying, that I was like, I'm not sure I'd be leaning into how long I've been in government on that stage, because I'm not sure. But the funny thing is, at least the polling in the early states, in Iowa and especially in New Hampshire, she's actually gotten, I mean, granted, we're talking like 2 or 3 points and they're still at 10%. But she's,
I mean, it's hard to say right now because we are still so early. And I think that Trump did suck so much air out of that room. And looking at the numbers, it is changing. But I don't think that they're putting a massive dent into the polling numbers by these debates. They're sort of chipping away. But the elephant in the room, proverbially and metaphorically and every other possible way, is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And that's who basically everyone wants. And the rest of this is sort of like a cute dog and pony show until further notice.
so Mark,
Well, I think everyone not named Trump needs this debate badly,
Yeah.
but I don't think the problem is when you look at the polling averages, you've got Trump, who's obviously taken off and risen up. He's hovering right now, right around that margin of error, and hasn't really moved much.
morning kick. Yeah, you've heard me say it every morning. I go on September 27th.
I mean, I'm going to watch everyone. I would like to see, unfortunately, the heavy fall of Chris Christie. I think he's just been so disingenuous, and having family in New Jersey and remembering Bridgegate and remembering him closing down a beach and then himself sitting and sunning himself on it. Those kinds of things don't really sit well with people. And he talks about integrity. So I really think that, and the attacking of Trump, I don't know who's telling him that that's the way to go. It's just not working. So I'm looking forward to his untimely political demise. That's about it. But I think I'm still just with Vivek. I just want to see what he does. I would really like Governor DeSantis to come home to Florida and govern us. He really dropped the ball on our Jacksonville mayor race. It was within 1 or 2 points. He didn't campaign for the Republican at all. He wasn't out there, spreading the word, getting people to vote, encouraging people to run to the polls. And the Republicans ended up losing. And that's a big loss for Florida. When we had those big floods in Fort Lauderdale, he was nowhere to be found. And that's not the image you want as a governor. And there should be laws about that, honestly. You shouldn't be allowed to run for president. We're still trying to govern a state. So I just want him to come home. I want Vivek to keep going because I like what he's saying. And I think it's making it at least interesting. And the rest, they'll fall where they may.
Mark, we had Vivek on the show, as I mentioned, and I got a lot of comments. A lot of people love him. And then there's a lot of people who were like, you need to look at his history, right? He's been involved in the World Economic Forum in Davos.
I think there will be a little bit of that. I think, he's going to get a little bit more incoming from the other people who are in the same polling vicinity. The question is going to be, what does Ron DeSantis do?
Yeah, that's the question. Like, where do you go from here? Everyone in Florida is saying that DeSantis is just going to move to Miami and be on all these billionaires' boards that have funded him, and sort of hang it up. But he still has to be here for another 2 years. So who knows? But it doesn't really seem that anyone's auditioning. But the most likely choice for VP, doesn't it seem to be Nikki Haley?
No,
right? Doesn't she
no.
seem like,
No.
I'll tell you why. Because
No?
I've always said that this is like a concentric circle. The person has to want it and Trump has to want them. I think after what Trump has seen, both in terms of how she left his administration, some of the stuff that she has said between announcing, and then some of the stuff she said after announcing, he's not going to pick her. He wouldn't.
About vice presidents, and I've obviously been close to that side of it, is regardless of party, each of them have one thing in common. They fill a hole or something missing in the presidential campaign or portfolio.
Thinking, who would you add? Who would you take off?
I would take off Kristi Noem.
Why? Why?
I think she has skeletons.
Okay. What is that? You think that bothers Donald Trump?
I don't think it bothers Donald Trump, but I think something could come out that could potentially hurt her. This is not, I'm just laying that out there and moving on. I love Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I think she would be an excellent choice. I like the idea of Elise Stefanik. I don't have anything else to add, but those are my three that I think. What about RFK Jr.?
I don't think that, you know why? Because he's not like the base. This is back like in the days when everyone said that there would be like a team up of Lieberman, and like the Republican base would revolt.
So maybe Laura Trump can do it. Maybe we just, put Laura in there, even though it's the same last name. I think she would be great.
Glenn Youngkin, if he could flip Virginia.
Well, I don't see Glenn Youngkin wanting to be Donald Trump's number two. Just the little that I know the guy. My take on this. The idea, the most valuable thing a candidate has in their time, and hanging out in Washington, D.C. among the Associated Press and a bunch of students does not seem to me a great use of time. Mark, would you tell your candidate to go?
No, I would tell them to run. Why do you need, to your point, I think you tweeted about it, Sean, why do you need the mainstream media and the liberal academia's approval in Washington, D.C.?
Couldn't agree more. There's absolutely no reason to be there. These are not hearts and minds that you're going to be changing. But I do like his approach that if there's a dinner there, absolutely. But no, absolutely not. You're going to get hit with questions that you probably don't want to answer in a way that you shouldn't be forced to answer. And there's just no way that it's going to benefit you in any way, shape, or form.
That's kind of my Univision view right now, too. But this raise your hand questions at the last debate. I look at these things as pretty, generally speaking, not that there might be some narrow case when it's like, before we move on, do you think whatever? I think that answering serious questions to be president of the United States by saying, raise your hand to me, seems pretty pedestrian. Erin.
I don't disagree with you on that at all. It's sort of also demeaning and sort of putting you down and making you feel like a child, like you're beholden to them. So I don't think that's the best way to sort of gauge a response. But I do like that Vivek was like, boom, his hand went straight up when he said he would pardon Trump. So, and I think that did show people sort of a visceral gut reaction.
Yes.
So it did have an impact, but it is kind of condescending.
No, you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And that's why I'm saying there is an element of it, because I agree with you that, Mark.
I think it depends on how many candidates are in it. If we have thinned the herd to maybe 3 or 4 candidates, then I think he might participate, depending on who the moderator is. I mean, if it's CNN, he's probably not going to participate unless he just wants to go joust with them.
Well, Erin, so go for it. Answer that first part, because I want to actually follow up on what Mark said as well.
Well, I just don't think that he's going to show up. Even if the herd is thinned a little bit, I do not think he's showing up for any reason. He's already been president. He doesn't need to prove himself, especially with this margin that he's in the lead by. There's just, what is the benefit? What is the upside? He's got the social media platforms. He popped back up on formerly Twitter, now X. I don't think the juice is not worth the squeeze for President Trump.
Well, I think to Mark's point, until it might, maybe that December debate right before Iowa, if he felt threatened, but he needs to, as I've said over and over again, if he wins Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada right through, it's over, right? So I think the reason we don't have a media partner is they don't have any more places to turn unless they go to Fox Nation.
You didn't talk about Newsmax?
Well, I mean, I don't know what the situation, I think there's a question of whether Newsmax has the capability of producing one.
Right. So that's another option, but I don't see that there's any. Well, the problem is the tertiary candidates, aka anyone other than Donald Trump, they're in a rock and a hard place. They know if they don't show up, they don't get the exposure, they don't get the bandwidth, if you will.
Right.
And if you're at this hostile sort of CNN environment, you know it's going to be extremely filled with sound bites that are going to make you look bad just by the way they write the questions. So it's sort of a double negative, and there's no benefit, but they know they have to do it.
Mark,
I'll give you one idea for a network that, and trust me, you're right. They're all liberal. They all hate us. But I will say one, CBS News has actually covered some of the Hunter Biden investigations in evening news on their morning program. So if you could get the main network.
CBS, to take Mark's proposition for a second, and they said Norah O'Donnell or Major Garrett we're going to moderate it. Would you think that would be a smart idea for a candidate to go?
Well, I was going to say also that I do believe that between those majors, the CBS, ABC, and NBC, CBS is always that sort of redheaded stepchild. So perhaps they were only showing the Hunter Biden stuff to sort of steal ratings away and propel themselves upward. So I don't know that their intentions would necessarily be altruistic in helping Republican candidates. So again, it goes back to that quandary. But I don't think that they're out there trying to bang the gong for Republicans. I just think they're trying to make their way up in the ratings.
So
I think X would probably be the best idea. But again, it's leaned so conservative now. But CBS, none of these majors are going to be shaping these hearts and minds or stealing votes over. But what are the independents watching? That's what I would like to know. We need to find out where they are.
But Erin, but here's my point. This gets back to the nut of what I keep asking. You and I get your point. I'm with you on a general election. But independents don't vote in a Republican primary or caucus. We'll have plenty of time.
In some states, right? In some states,
well, no, you can be unaffiliated and then vote. But you're not an independent if you're going to vote in a Republican primary or caucus. You might not affiliate with that party, but you're going to do it. And my point is, I want to know who the best Republican is. I want to vote who the best conservative is. I don't really care at this point what an independent thinks. I will once we have a nominee and we have to figure out how do we take that to the 8 states that are going to matter.
Very valid point. Yeah, you got to focus on the issues at hand, which is getting that Republican elected, especially when this field is so crowded, trying to take the air out of the room from Donald Trump.
Okay, so I had to look ahead 20 days. Aside from maybe Asa Hutchinson, is there anyone else who's not going to be on that stage?
We know that the Miami mayor, Suarez, has dropped out.
Right.
I think that the rest are going to be sticking around.
I think until we head into this Alabama or whatever the November debate is going to be, then we're not really. These guys are clinging on for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You bet. All right.